Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. I got this email from Anonymous, the Jonas prophecy and the 8 Ninevehs. And then in the email, hey, Jared, I ran across this video in a group. I don't know the person doing the video. I've never watched them before, but it's the info I thought you might be interested in. I know that you'll do your own research and be able to make a really cool video. I just wasn't sure if you've been made aware of how cool this is. Here's the video I saw. It's just the first 10 minutes. And here it is right here, you guys. I'll put the link for the video in the description box below. The name of the channel is my.christian.homestead. So I'm assuming that he's a member of the church because Manti, that's a... I don't know if there's any other Mantis outside of Utah or outside of the church, like the name Manti. But I didn't watch the video. I usually don't have time to watch videos, but I'm gonna go over the information that Anonymous put in the email. Okay, so out of the 9 Ninevehs, 2 are in 100% totality, and the least, which is Virginia, is still 90.7% in totality. This is compared to less than 60% for most of Utah. Here are the numbers in case you're interested. I'm absolutely astonished. And so here are the locations for, or this, like the states and provinces that have a city named Nineveh. Ohio, 100%, Indiana, 100%, Texas, 99%, Pennsylvania, 98.9%, New York, 97.1%, Kentucky, 97.1%, Nova Scotia, 97.1%, Virginia, 90.7%. For this email, I'd like to stay anonymous since I'm referencing a YouTube source. I don't know. Thanks. Okay, no problem. So I wanted to, like you said, Anonymous, I wanted to do my own research and verify everything. And I appreciate your confidence in me being able to produce a cool video. I hope that they're cool. And I'm glad that you sent this email because it led me to do a bunch of different things, actually. So, okay, there's a bunch of things to talk about. Okay, first we're going to talk about these cities called Nineveh in the United States and the eclipse that's coming up on April 8th. And then we're going to do a quick review of the other eclipses because what I did is I finally took the step to figure out how to import essentially vector images in paths into Google Earth. So what I mean by that is, for example, here's the 2024 eclipse. I got this from a NASA website. In fact, I got all 3 eclipses for Google Earth from these 2 websites right here, from NASA Scientific Visualization Studio. This one has the 2023 and the 2024 eclipses, and then here's the one from 2017. Although, if you do this yourself, it's a shape file on this one. For Google Earth, you have to have a KML file that's like, I guess it's Google's proprietary file format for Google Earth. So you have to convert it from a shape file to a KML. If you need help with that, let me know. I can send you a video. It's not too hard, but you have to download some software in order to do it, but it's not really that difficult of a thing. So anyway, I got these paths for all 3 eclipses. Here they are from NASA. So I know that these are accurate. And this is the first time that I've been able to do this on Google Earth. Okay, so what we're going to do is talk about all 3 eclipses, and I've put down all the significant sites, like church sites, and then we're about to talk about the Ninevehs, and then I decided to go ahead and do the Salems as well, because that was a big deal with the 2017 eclipse, that there were 7 cities called Salem in the path of the 2017 eclipse. So we will start with Nineveh, and then we'll talk about the eclipses. And then afterwards, we'll kind of come back to the idea of Nineveh because there's been a lot of weird things over the last few years having to do with Nineveh and Jonah, like different signs. For example, I've done a couple of videos about this already, but there was a man that was literally swallowed, or at least in the mouth of a whale back in 2021. I didn't think that was actually like really possible outside of a miracle like Jonah, but no, it actually happened. And here he is on Jimmy Kimmel Live. So we had that. we had this other thing where there was a Jewish boy named Jonah. He was the first one to be pulled out of the Surfside. What were they called? The Champlain Tower collapse. You remember that? It happened the same year. It happened just a few months after the guy that got swallowed by a whale. The first survivor to be pulled out was a boy, not just any boy, a Jewish boy named Jonah. And then more recently, when was this? This was last year. There was a wedding that was taking place, like I guess the reception, and a fire broke out, and it was near Nineveh. It was in the province of Nineveh, but it's actually very close to Nineveh. So I feel like there's something going on, and I have some ideas. I think I have some better ideas now what this might mean. So talking about Nineveh here, this is just the latest entry in this like ongoing series of like Jonah, Nineveh signs that have been taking place. Okay, so here you see the path of totality for the upcoming 2024 eclipse. Okay. You have 3 lines. The one in the center is the center line, and then the ones on the outside are the limits of where you'd have to be to experience the full eclipse. If you're outside those lines, you're not going to experience the full eclipse. Okay, this is effectively the path of the shadow of the eclipse on the earth. Okay, so let me turn on Nineveh. And what I did is I ended up searching the entire United States for any cities named Nineveh. Dang it, I should have done Canada too. Well, no, nothing pulled up because I searched. Okay, no, nothing pulled up for Canada. Okay, so let me turn off the borders and labels so you can see it a little bit easier. So here are the locations of all the towns or cities named Nineveh that I could find. And so you have these two right here that are definitely inside the path of the eclipse. Let me turn on borders and labels again. So one, excuse me, one in Indiana, not too far away from Indianapolis, and then another one in Ohio. So when it comes to signs, this is just my own personal preference when it comes to these eclipses and signs. I tend to stick with just whatever is actually in the path of totality, or that which is not in the path of totality. In the case of the October 2023 eclipse, I'll show you that in just a minute. But here you have, all the Ninevehs in the United States that I know of, that I search for. The one that probably gets the closest, just eyeballing it, is this one down here in Texas. Let me turn on the borders again. It's Texas, right? Yeah, it's East Texas, east of Waco. So it is interesting. I don't know. It's up to each one of us if we want to make something out of this or not. I'm going to keep it on my radar. I don't feel like it's as strong of a sign as other things, like what I'm about to talk about, but I am going to keep note of it. It's interesting. It's kind of weird how all these Ninevehs are basically, they're relatively close to the path of the eclipse. Like Anonymous was saying, like compare Utah, its location in relation to the 2024 eclipse, and it's really far. So is Idaho, Montana. So all the Ninevehs are relatively close. Oh yeah, duh. There's this Nineveh here in Nova Scotia. I already did have one because it was in the email. Okay, sorry. It took a while to prepare this video. So I find that interesting. So I'm going to take note of it. Thank you, Anonymous, for bringing this up. I guess if you want to find out more, go watch that video, and he maybe have more that he has to share in regards to this. So yeah, so now I have it on my Google Earth. Okay, now let's see. Let me turn off Nineveh, and now let me turn on the 2017 eclipse, and then I'm going to turn on the church sites. These I feel are very, very, very significant because these are locations that are very special and unique to our church, and they're incredibly important locations. So what I did, and you can do this too. Let's see, where do I have it? Right here. What I did is I went to this part of the church website that has the like the gospel maps or the church history maps. And I looked over all these locations, right? So you have this first one, northeastern United States, and then you have some that like zoom in, Palmyra, Manchester. And then you have this one, the New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio area of the United States, and all the different things that took place here. Okay. If you have a quad, you should have this along with the Bible maps. I'm sure you're familiar with these maps. It's in your scriptures. And so I took all of these, and the ones that fell in the path of totality, I went ahead and put a place mark for it. So starting up here, so this one we're looking at the 2024 eclipse. We have the Sacred Grove. We have Menden, and I forgot what that was, so I put something in the description because I knew I was going to forget. Menden was the early home of Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball. And then we have Fayette, which is where the church was organized. It was also the first headquarters of the church. And then also the Book of Mormon translation was completed here in 1829. Okay, so very, very significant places, especially Fayette and the Sacred Grove. The Sacred Grove, this is where the restoration began. This is where Jesus Christ and God the Father appeared to Joseph Smith. And I'm not aware of any other locations where God the Father has appeared. We usually don't see or hear too much from him. It's usually Christ. If you have any resources on that, I'd be interested if God the Father's appeared other places, but I'm not really too familiar with any stories of any other time other than this where he may have appeared. So anyway, first headquarters of the church, the completion of the Book of Mormon, and then the church was established there, the Sacred Grove. And then you come down here, you have Hiram, Ohio, which was the third headquarters of the church. Amherst says Joseph Smith was sustained as president of the high priesthood on January 25th, 1832 at this place. And then you have the Kirtland Temple, right? Kirtland and the Kirtland Temple. The first temple since the Romans destroyed the second temple after the time of the crucifixion in 70 AD. For the first time since then, well, excluding any temples that may have been in the Americas, we now have this first temple in modern times. Jesus Christ appeared there, as well as Moses and Elias and Elijah. They restored very, very important priesthood keys. Okay, and so that's what we have for the 2024 eclipse. All these sites are going to be in the path of totality. And then if we go back to 2017, this is really what put this whole eclipse thing on everybody's radar. We had this, and this is the Kansas City area. Okay, we have the Independence Visitor Center, which is it's currently being used as a visitor center, but it's been designed according to the specifications revealed to Joseph Smith for the 24 temples of the 24 temple complex of New Jerusalem. The first temple was supposed to be built right here, but there's the Church of Christ temple lot that owns that lot. But it wasn't ever going to just be that temple. There's going to be 24. And so we have this one in waiting. And this is the site, the future site of the New Jerusalem. Okay, so the eclipse went over New Jerusalem. It also went over Far West, which was church headquarters for a time. And it also barely included Adam-on-Diamond. And I feel like this is significant because look how close Adam-on-Diamond is to the northern edge of the path of totality. If it had been south just a few more miles, Adam-on-Diamond would not have been included in it. So this path went in such a way that it was able to include both Adam-on-Diamond and New Jerusalem, which I think is just extraordinary. All right. So in the beginning days, or like in the early days of talking about the eclipse, everybody was focused on this eclipse in 2017 and the one coming up in 2024 because they're like 7 years apart roughly, and they make this big X over the United States. Now, it's not really an uncommon thing for eclipses to make an X or cross paths. But what is more unusual is to have these eclipses that go from coast to coast, from one side of the continent to the other. And they're pretty close together, right? And so, and the center place, or like the center point, is actually in Illinois, and the closest city or town is Carbondale. If it'll pull up, there's Carbondale up there, and it's right over this lake called Cedar Lake. All right, that's where they cross. I know that people have said that this area is also known as Little Egypt, which is interesting. I just kind of take note of that, but I don't put too much significance on that. But Little Egypt, okay? As though, you know, the United States is Little Egypt. It's the descendant of all these great empires, the Roman Empire and Greeks, and going back to Egypt. So anyway, a lot of Christians view this as a sign that it's the last days, and Christ is going to come. And because our nation has departed from biblical values for the most part, that it's not a good thing for the United States because it's become a wicked place. But I think that these eclipses are much more a message. I mean, it's a message for the world, but it's a message that we, as members of the church, should definitely, be aware of, and we should be thinking about this. These two eclipses go over some of our most sacred sites. New Jerusalem is going to be one of the world capitals in the millennium, right? Adam Mondayamin. We're going to have the meeting of Adam Mondayamin there if it hasn't already taken place, or the first sessions haven't already taken place. That's where Adam and Eve lived after being cast out of the Garden of Eden. And New Jerusalem, it's in the location, the site of the Garden of Eden, the sacred grove, so very, very significant places. And then we have the October 14th eclipse, which happened just 7 days after the war in Israel started. And Israel 365 wrote an article about that. They viewed it as important, even though it didn't go over Israel or anything like that. They saw it as significant that it happened 7 days after the war started. So with this one, to me, it doesn't seem that it goes over anywhere, any one particular location that's special or unique, but rather it goes over Utah. But the thing that blows my mind about this eclipse, let me turn on all the temples. Here we go. So these are all the temples of the church. The ones that are in white are in operation. If it's in green, then it's under construction. If it's blue, then it's only announced. Construction has not yet begun. And so you see that Utah is just full of temples, except for this part right here. And this is the only path that the eclipse could have taken to miss as many temples as possible. And the only one that was in operation at the time was the Monticello, Utah temple. The Manti temple and I think it still is. I should maybe have another color for if it's having renovations. Maybe not. I don't know. I'll think about it. Anyway, the Manti temple was decommissioned at the time of the eclipse. So the only operational temple in Utah during that eclipse was the Monticello, Utah temple right here. There is no other path that an eclipse could go through and not miss a temple. This is the only one where it would miss the maximum number of temples, only going over one. And I think that that's significant. I don't know how to interpret it, but I see that it's very, very unlikely. All this is very, very unlikely. It's really crazy. Okay, so let's turn those off. Let's see. I'm going to turn off temples, and now let's turn off borders and labels, and we'll turn off the church sites. Okay, now we'll take a look at this whole thing with the Salems, because you have. I found this website. I couldn't find many others, but you have this from Chapel Hill United Methodist Church. And on there, they have this graphic biblical eclipse, coincidence. And then it has Salem, Oregon, Salem, Idaho, Salem, Wyoming, Salem, Nebraska, Salem, Missouri, Salem, Kentucky, and Salem, South Carolina. The 7 Salems. I do think that it's interesting. I just like Nineveh, I looked for all Salems across the entire United States, and most states do have a city or a town named Salem. Not that that takes away from this, but you'll see that it is rather common. And then the way that I count it, again, I count, for me, the way that it makes sense for me, I count if it's actually in the path of totality. So starting with Salem, Oregon, you have 1, and then you have 2, and then you have 3, 4. This one is just barely outside. 5. So I count 5, not 7. When it comes to Wyoming, there's not actually, I mean, there may have been at one time, but there's not actually a current town or city called Salem. There is Salem Cemetery, and I'm assuming that was named after some old town that used to exist there. So if we're talking about just inside the path of totality, there's only 5 Salems. Not that that takes away from it. It would be kind of, it'd be more incredible if it was 7, because 7 is a very biblical number, you know. And you know, you do have this one right here, which is right on the edge. I don't know if it goes through city limits or not. I didn't go that far. Maybe it does. Who knows? Maybe I'll check that out some other excuse me, some other time. But there you have it. And then you have the fact that you have the 3 eclipses. When you take them together, it makes the Paleo Hebrew letter of Aleph. Let me pull that up. Paleo Hebrew script. Wikipedia, which is also Phoenician. It's the same thing. So see, you have Aleph right here. Okay, it goes Aleph, Bet. What's after that? Is it Gimel? I can't remember. Whatever. So you have the letters that start here. They go this way, here, this way. And then the last one is Tav, which looks like an X. I didn't put the eclipse or the eclipses that are going to go over the Red Sea in, I can't remember when, sometime in the 2030s. I'm not that interested in it. If we get to that point and the second coming hasn't happened yet, then I'll be more interested. But you have 2 eclipses that basically go over here. They intersect over the Red Sea. You know, there are some implications to that, but I am not looking that far out. So that's what I have as far as eclipses go, and looking at Google Earth. And then just a reminder, I have these 2 new spreadsheets for eclipses. The first one is called Signs Eclipses 1, and then the second one is called Signs Eclipses 2. And I took all these locations. I have all 7 headquarters of the church, including the future 8th headquarters of the church, which will be New Jerusalem. Right now, Salt Lake City is the 7th headquarters of the church. There's a church article about this, by the way, in case you're questioning that. But I have St. George, the 7 church headquarters, Adamondayaman, Palmyra, a.k.a. Sacred Grove. You know, I'll just change it to Sacred Grove. I'll just do that. Sacred Grove, Washington, D.C., New York City, Rome, Jerusalem. Okay, so this goes from the year 1900 until the year 2199, and it has all eclipses that are either, well, that are total eclipse, or sorry, that are either total or annular eclipses. An annular eclipse is basically the same as a total eclipse, but it's when the moon is at its farthest away from the Earth, and so you don't get the full effect. Whereas a total eclipse, the moon is closer to the Earth and you get the full effect. But it's, yeah, there's just that difference. Okay, so that's all that I'm tracking here. Those 2 types of eclipses. Let me zoom out. Okay. So you have the first one that we have on this chart right here is January 24th, 1925, just a few months after President Nelson was born, September 9th of 1924. A few months later, there's an eclipse that goes over New York City, Fayette, the first headquarters of the church, and the Sacred Grove. And then 1933, there's an annular eclipse over Jerusalem. And then after that, there is nothing for a long, long time, all the way until 1994. And then in 1994, you have an annular eclipse that goes over Fayette, the Sacred Grove, Hiram, Ohio, which is the third headquarters of the church, Kirtland, Ohio, the site of the temple, the first temple, and it's also the second headquarters of the church, and then also Independence, Missouri. So this was really significant, and this is the year that Ezra Taft Benson passed away. There were other things going on that year, but I'm not going to cover that again. That's kind of like the big thing. It was a transition time. Ezra Taft Benson is, I think, a president of the church that really stands out, and he's very similar to President Nelson in terms of how much he spoke about the second coming. It's only President Nelson and him that have spoken this much about the second coming. All right, then we have St. George in 2012, and then here we are at the 2017 eclipse that goes over Independence, Far West, and Adamandayaman. And then 7 years later, you have this one, Kirtland, Hiram, Sacred Grove, but this time it's not a few months after President Nelson is born. It's during his 7th year as president of the church. Very interesting. And then you have Fayette, first headquarters of the church. So these 2 years really stand out. The ones that really stand out, I guess, are 1994, 2017, and 2024. And then going into the future, you have some that come up. You have one in Salt Lake in 2045, one over Winter Quarters, 6th headquarters of the church, in 2048. And you just have just kind of onesies and twosies. You get to 2093 and you have Kirtland, Hiram, and Fayette. I mean, it doesn't really compare that much to the ones in 2017 and this year. Here's another one, Kirtland, Hiram, in Washington, D.C. in 2111. 2154, Independence, Far West, Washington, D.C. And yeah, there's just nothing really that compares to what we're seeing in 1994, 2017, and this year, 2024. In fact, 2024, so the one eclipse that went over the most locations that I have on this spreadsheet is 1994 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 locations. And then the next biggest one, or the next largest number of locations, is this one this year with 4, Kirtland, Hiram, Sacred Grove, and Fayette. And you can't find another time within these like 300 years or 200 years or whatever. 300 years that are like that. 1994 in 2024. It's weird. So I think we better pay attention. And I feel like these are really big signs of the times. Okay, so now let's be done with that. I'll turn off the eclipses. Now let's go to the other side of the world and let's talk about Nineveh. All right, so here's Nineveh. Let me turn on the borders. Nineveh is in Iraq. It's the ancient ruins are across the river, the Tigris River from Mosul. Okay, there's Mosul right there. So Nineveh is somewhere over here. I haven't found like the exact location of the ruins, but what I read is that it's on the other side of the river. And you have this city over here, Bakdida, also known as Karakosh, which is in Nineveh province. Okay. And relatively speaking, when we zoom out and we look at all of Iraq, they're essentially right next to each other. They're extremely close. Okay. So keep that in mind. let's talk about Jonah and Nineveh. The reason why I have Bhaktita, this is where he had the fire at the wedding. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Okay, so Nineveh and Jonah. Okay, so ultimately, what I think is going on here is, I think just like most things, it's a sign for the world. But I think that all this stuff we're about to go over is specifically for the Jews. Okay, so if we go to the Bible dictionary for Nineveh, capital of Assyria on the eastern bank of the Tigris, its traditional founder being Nimrod, the great hunter. And then later on, repentant Nineveh, a sign to the Jews. Okay, now think about this. When Christ came, the Jews did not accept him. They had preconceptions based on their own understanding. They leaned to their own understanding, and they had preconceptions of what the Messiah was supposed to look like. And so when he came, they missed it, right? And they rejected him. And as a consequence of that, first, the gospel at the time of Christ and his ministry, it went to the Jews first, right? And there were many Jews that accepted it, but there were many that did not. And then after that, the gospel went to the Gentiles. And it's been like that essentially since that time. Now the church has been restored, and so the fullness of the gospel is going to the Gentiles. We have our missionary program, and hopefully all of us are sharing copies of the Book of Mormon. I'll have an update on that, by the way. I'll try and do that for the next video. For the Book of Mormon, the Flood the Earth Challenge. So, excuse me. So, you have a situation where Gentiles are being preached to for like these last 2,000 years. They're being preached to, they're accepting Christ, they're repenting, and especially during the period of the restoration and this last dispensation, because now Gentiles can actually embrace all of the gospel, the fullness of the gospel, and enter into the covenants necessary for exaltation. So it's really, really happening right now. And in the last days, we know that first, there's the whole thing, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Well, during Christ's dispensation, the dispensation of the meridian of time, it first went to the Jews, then it went to the Gentiles, but now it's going to the Gentiles, and then it'll go to the Jews. I have a playlist about the times of the Gentiles. It's not going to go to the Jews in earnest until Christ comes himself. Before he comes, the Jews are going to begin to believe. We already have Jews that have converted to the church. There's also the Messianic Jewish movement, and it's growing, where Jews are accepting Christ as Messiah. But it's not going to go to them in mass until Christ himself comes. Go see my playlist for all the sources for that. Okay, so you see what I'm saying? You have Jonah, who was a prophet that went to a Gentile city, and he preached to them, and they repented. Okay, just like how Christ came and the gospel after the Jews went to the Gentiles, and many of them have accepted it, even to this day. Many more have rejected it, but many of them have accepted it. Okay, so Matthew 12:41. The men of Nineveh shall rise in judgment with this generation, and shall condemn it, because they repented. They repented at the preaching of Jonas, and behold, a greater than Jonas is here. And then Luke 11:32. Well, it's just the same thing. So you just have the two different accounts. Okay. Let's go to, this is the Institute Student Manual for the Old Testament, Kings through Malachi, Jonah. One should not flee from one's responsibilities. Okay. The prophet Jonah was an unusual servant of the Lord. Jonah was called on a mission very similar to that of other prophets. He was to carry repentance to a people ripening in iniquity. Unlike other prophets, however, Jonah responded by attempting to flee from his assignment. Had his reason been cowardice, though still wrong, it would have been understandable. The brutality of the Assyrians in the treatment of their enemies was well known. But Jonah's problem did not seem to be cowardice. Rather, it seems to have been resentment against the Lord for giving the hated enemy a chance to repent. To someone who has been taught to have Christian love for all men, Jonah's attitude may seem almost unbelievable. But to an Israelite who had been taught that he was of the chosen people and that the Gentiles were corrupt and therefore not acceptable to God, Jonah's attitude was more understandable. Though surprising because we expect a different response from the Lord's prophets, Jonah's response was very human. As you read Jonah's story, see if you can understand what made him respond as he did. Okay. We're going into, I hope this is the right highlight. These should be all the highlights from before. Quote, there can be little doubt, therefore, that Jonah was a historical person and was engaged in prophetic activities. The prophet's home, Gath Hefer, according to Joshua 19:10-13, was located in the territory of the tribe of Zebulun. According to monastic tradition, it was the same as the present Arab village of El Meshed, some 3 miles northeast of Nazareth, where one of the many Muslim tombs of Nebi Yunus, the prophet Jonah, is pointed out. Now, this is another interesting thing right here. Okay, that essentially this was during the time before the northern kingdom was taken captive into Assyria. So here's a timeline produced by the church for seminary, and you see Jonah right here. So it was a very pivotal moment in the history of Israel. It was back when when all the tribes were still there in the land, right? And now here we are on the other side of this story where we're in the last dispensation, and now the tribes are being gathered again. The gospel is going to the Gentiles. Because we've been scattered throughout the Gentile nations, we ourselves have essentially become Gentiles, but we're rediscovered. We have quotes from Brigham Young, Joseph Fielding Smith about the fact that literally almost everybody in the church actually has the blood of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in them. But because of our lost state, we were essentially the same as Gentiles, like pure Gentiles. But anyway, so now Israel's being gathered again. So Jonah is like this kind of like hinge point type character, you know. There's more to say. Let's continue. Okay. Jonah's name means dove, and that of his father, truthful. Since Jonah lived during the reign of Jeroboam, it is possible to date him at approximately 788 BC. But Jonah and Jesus were from the Galilee area. That Jonah's story is a true one and not an allegory, as some scholars maintain, is evidenced by 2 Kings 14:25 and 3 New Testament references. The story of Jonah was referred to by our Lord as on 2 occasions when he was asked for a sign from heaven. In each case, he gave the sign of the prophet Jonah. The event in that prophet's life being a foreshadowing of Jesus' own death and resurrection. Now, this is where it starts to get kind of even more interesting. Jonah's life and experiences, like Job's, provide a universal lesson similar to an allegory, and the application to all men is drawn from one man's actual experiences. Jonah was a type of Christ. Okay? Jonah was a type of Christ in that he was in the belly of the whale, in quote-unquote hell, in his own words, just as Jesus was in the grave for 3 days and then came forth again. Okay, so you have the Jews at that time that did not accept him, and Christ said, the only sign you're going to get is when I actually do what I came here to do, when I'm resurrected. He didn't flat out say that to them, but he said, the only sign that you're going to have is the sign of Jonas. And what happened was Christ was crucified and then resurrected. And now, here in the last days, when he comes, they are going to recognize him. He's going to come the way that they expected. So you can see how there's this connection between how they received him when he first came, and that's the only sign that he gave them. And now, in the last days, as the gospel is about to go to them, he's going to come in a very obvious way, and they're going to accept him, and then the gospel is going to go to them. You see the connection? And so this might be why we're seeing all these Jonah signs right now. I'm going to skip forward so this doesn't go too long. There was more that I was going to read, but that's basically all you need to know. Yeah, right here. The Jews sought him for a sign of his divinity. He gave them one, but not what they expected. The scoffers of his day, notwithstanding his mighty works, were incapable, because of sin, of believing. Yeah. So, the signs back then for them were subtle, not what they were expecting, even though there were signs. But now, when the gospel is about to go to them, they're going to recognize him when he comes in power and great glory. So you have this that happened in 2021. A man was swallowed by a whale. And I promise you, there are people that took this as a sign. I know that because there were YouTubers making videos about this that viewed it as a sign. And I haven't read anything about like a Jewish reaction to this story, but we're about to see the Jewish point of view of the story of Jonah and when they read it throughout the year. So you had this 10 Boston. Oh my, I'm in the mouth of a whale. What it's like being swallowed by a humpback. A Massachusetts man had a whale of a tale to tell Friday, though it's one plenty of people thought was more of a fishtail. You gotta love the puns and the jokes. But Cape Cod commercial lobster diver Michael Packer's injuries and his diving mate's own account back Packer's story that he was briefly swallowed by a humpback whale off the coast of Cape Cod. He recounted the harrowing and painful moment he realized he was in the closed mouth of one of the world's largest creatures. Experts said the encounter was rare and likely a complete accident. Packard had been faced with an immediate struggle in the hard, shaking mouth of the whale as his breathing regulator came out of his mouth, and he had to find it. Then, as the seconds ticked by, Packard thought, "This is how you're going to die, in the mouth of a whale." That would suck. He didn't know if he would be swallowed or suffocate, he said, and he thought about his 12 and 16-year-old sons, wife, mother, and family. Quote, "I just was struggling, but I knew this was this massive creature, and there was no way I was going to bust myself out of there," Packer recalled. Then suddenly Packard saw light, felt the whale shake its head, and was thrown out of the water. I was just laying on the surface floating and saw his tail, and he went back down. And I was like, oh my, I got out of that. I survived. Yeah, that would be a pretty insane thing to happen to you. So this was around June of 2021. And then just a month later, okay, this article is from July 15th, 2021. Boy who survived Surfside building collapse thanks Dave, Charlie, Kenny, Corey, Cesar, and Alex. Okay, Surfside, Florida. Building collapse survivor Jonah, Handler's father, released a public statement of gratitude to his 50-year-old son's rescuers, and to those who have helped to support them through the traumatic and painful experience. Nicholas Balboa had traveled from Phoenix, Arizona to Surfside, and he was walking his dog near Champlain Towers South at 8777. Interesting that you have 3 sevens there. Collins Avenue. The L-shaped building's northeastern section collapsed first. Jonah and Fang lived in the 12-story building's northwestern section that fell over. Anyway, it goes on to say that because of that, the guy that was there from Phoenix, he saw it all take place, and he helped to essentially save Jonah's life, and he was the first one pulled out alive. It was a Jewish boy named Jonah. And this caught the attention of many. Here you have Yeshiva World News, which is a Jewish website. And it says, Jewish teens' miraculous survival in Florida collapse finds purpose. And there's his dad right there. And look what his dad says. Handler says he didn't believe his son surviving the devastation was an accident. Quote, I don't think it was luck. I really believe he's a miracle. I believe he was chosen for something, he said. And the location, okay, Surfside and this area, it's a very Jewish area. Okay, this is for the Surfside condominium collapse article. Members of Hatzalah of Southern Florida, a Jewish faith-based ambulance service, which was authorized to transport patients as part of a law signed the previous week in Surfside, were among the first to respond, setting up an on-site triage station. Israel offered clothes, medication. So Israel, the country, offered clothes, medication, food, water, and other aid to the victims of the collapse. At least 35 of the missing were Jewish, but it was not yet clear whether any were Israeli citizens, according to Israeli Consul General Meir Tamari, who came to the scene and conveyed an official offer from the Israeli government to send the Israeli Defense Forces Home Front Command search and rescue team to assist in rescue efforts. And then the Wikipedia article for Surfside, Florida, Jewish population. As of 2021, approximately 1/3 of the population of Surfside are Jews. It is also the most Jewish community in the Miami metropolitan area. Around 2,500 Jews reside in Surfside, including neighboring areas. 34% of Jews describe themselves as Orthodox, 24% as conservative, 18% as Reform, and 24% as just Jewish. So isn't that weird? The month before this happened, a man was literally swallowed by a whale. A month later, there's this building collapse, and the first one to be pulled out is a Jewish boy named Jonah. That is really weird. And I feel like it's a foreshadowing of the second coming. That when he comes this time, they're not just going to have the sign of Jonah of, I guess that, no, they are. They are going to have the sign of Jonah. The resurrected Christ is going to come to them. So Christ was resurrected all the way back then after his crucifixion, right? And he said, you'll receive the sign of Jonah. But it's going to come in an even bigger way at the second coming because the resurrected Christ is going to come. Oh my gosh, that's what it is. I think that's what it is. This is incredible. Oh yeah, the tower, which is located 1 block away from where Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump currently live, has a mix of seasonal and year-round residents. Mayor Burkett said the building keeps a log of guests staying, but does not keep track of when owners are in the residence. So anyway, this is also where Trump's daughter and son-in-law have a place, right? Here's a picture of it, what happened. Yeah, that's all that we'll read from that. Let's move on. And now we have this the most recent happening that I know of. This article is from September of 2023. Iraq fire, around 100 killed in blaze at wedding party in Karakosh. Again, let's go back to Google Earth. So right here, very close to Nineveh. At least 94 people have died and 100 others are injured after a fire broke out during a wedding in Iraq's biggest Christian town on Tuesday night. Hundreds were celebrating at a banqueting hall in Karakosh in Nineveh province when the tragedy happened. So here we have some potential symbolism. Again, when Christ comes, it's likened to a wedding. You have the 10 virgins waiting for the wedding to start. You have Christ. He's the bridegroom. You have the marriage feast. You have all this stuff. There's all this wedding imagery. And here, close to Nineveh, there's a wedding that caught fire. When Christ comes, we know that that's one of the main events, is the purifying of the earth, the burning of the wicked. Witnesses and civil defense officials said the fire was sparked by fireworks set off as the bride and groom danced. Highly flammable metal and plastic composite panels that covered the hall fueled the blaze, they added. Security forces arrested 10 of the venue's staff, its owner, and 3 people involved with the fireworks on Wednesday. In the afternoon, hundreds of mourners attended a funeral for more than 40 of the victims at a cemetery in Karakosh, which is also known as Al-Hamdaniya and Bakdida. Some carried portraits of their deceased loved ones. Civil defense officials told BBC News Arabic that both the groom and his bride survived, though initial reports said they had perished. So, yeah, you have this, and a very fitting foreshadowing, I think, for the second coming. And then here's another article. I don't think I have anything too special to share from this one. And then these ones just talk about where Nineveh is. I used it in the last video. I'm not going to use it here. Okay, so bringing it back full circle, we have this interesting thing, with the upcoming eclipse and these cities called Nineveh. Let me turn off borders and labels. And although there are only 2 that are in the path of totality, all of them are kind of along, this area, even though they're not inside the path of totality. All the way up here in Nova Scotia, going all the way down to Texas. They're all, relatively close. When we're looking at the entire continent, they're all relatively close. And then 2 of them are actually inside the path of totality. So, just more signs of the times. It's exciting. All right, that's going to be it for this one. Thank you, Anonymous, for the email. If you guys haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.